Bonjour, merci d'avoir accepté notre invitation et d'être avec nous aujourd'hui pour notre deuxième édition de notre événement Femmes dans l'industrie ferroviaire. Good day. I would like to welcome and thank you all for being here today for our second edition of Women in Rail. I am Caroline Healy, Executive Vice President and General Counsel with the Railway Association of Canada. Today, I am speaking to you from Montreal. Aujourd'hui, je vous parle en direct de Montréal. I would like to acknowledge that the land I am on is the traditional Kanien'kehá:ka territory, and I am grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. As part of our journey towards diversity and inclusion, this very topic of women in rail, in the rail industry is essential for our association and our industry. Still today, the rail industry's diversity and inclusiveness profile is lacking, especially when it comes to female representation. Selon Statistique Canada et les données colligées par notre association, seulement 12% des postes dans l'industrie ferroviaire sont occupés par des femmes. Women are significantly underrepresented in the rail industry. Their share in the industry is around 80% lower than their share in the Canadian labor force. Ce midi et demain midi, nous avons un excellent programme et une modératrice, des panélistes, conférencières et conférenciers exceptionnels. Les thèmes abordés seront les suivants. Premièrement, comment accompagner judicieusement les femmes dans votre organisation? Et deux, comment les hommes peuvent devenir de meilleurs alliés pour favoriser l'égalité des genres? Our themes will focus on first, how to mentor women within your organization, and second, how men can become better allies for gender equality. Now, I would like to run through a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please note that we are recording this session. There will be a short poll at the end of the session, and we encourage you all to please fill it out as it helps us improve our events going forward. The poll doesn't allow for you to put your own suggestions for next year's topic, but we encourage you all to write any potential themes you would like to hear about next year in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to type your question in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen.
So I'm going to share my screen with everyone. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to talk on probably the topic that is most near and dear to my heart and the reason that I feel that we've had the success that we've had at Ontario Northland. I'm going to take you through some of the journey that we've been on at Ontario Northland and start by just reiterating a couple of things. We are a unique organization. We do passenger rail and rail freight, which is unique in having that under one umbrella, but also add to that a motor coach division. So the ability to really interconnect transportation to not just rural Ontario, but throughout the world through the Class 1 railways and certainly through other private carriers on the bus side. So we've been in business, like many of the people I'm sure that are watching, as a railway for over about 120 years actually right now. And so, you know, obviously really rich history, really reason to make sure that the organization is strong and sustainable going forward. And so taking you through a journey, when we talk about diversity, we fast forward from 1902 to the mid 1980s, and not a lot of progress in the first 80 years at Ontario Northland in terms of women. We had about less than 4%. This is a picture of the senior team at the time. Nice to see one woman in the middle there. And I guess that's what, you know, we're going to set the stage with when we're talking about diversity and just raising awareness so that people start talking about what it feels like to be the minority in the room, whether that's women or people of color or any minority out there. It's intimidating. And you can imagine walking into a room. If you fast forward into my career, 15 years after this picture was taken in the mid 90s, I had just graduated from engineering, one of few women. I went into engineering and process automation, one of few women, and regularly walked into the room as the only woman there. And so, you know, what's that like? Well, I can tell you that I was very specific about not looking different, not talking different, not acting different. So I knew every sports stat there was to know, and luckily I love sports, but wanting to always fit in. I didn't ever wear anything except for a black suit. And I certainly didn't talk about emotions, empathy, or my excitement to start a family at some point in my career. That was off the table because I didn't want to raise a red flag. And I mean, it's kind of funny because we don't want to call people out, but at the same time, look at this picture. We need to have change. We need to have different thoughts around the table. And when people are all born within the same decade and look and come from the same perspectives in their background, there's not a lot of diverse thinking that goes on. So let's fast forward to 2012. 2012, 6% more of women, so less than 10% in the organization. And in fact, that's what the railway industry is at about right now on average. And that's a problem, right? You're talking about one woman for every 9 men around the table, where again, not a lot of diverse thinking. And certainly if it takes us 30 plus years to add 6%, we're all going to be dead by the time there's some gender equality, especially with the impact that COVID has had on women in any type of industry right now. The ones that have been hit hardest are the ones that had more women in them. So we need to change our thinking. We need to get men as allies. We need to understand what biases are in the workplace. And I'll start by sharing in 2012, this is what our transportation map looked like. The white line is our bus network, primarily north-south. Largest short line in Canada with 700 miles of track in Northern Ontario, and then a passenger rail service that connects the James Bay communities, and the only land link. So very essential transportation services that are occurring. Now, in 2014, I was approached at the time, they were making a change at the president level, and they asked me if I would step in as interim president and CEO in October of 2014. And like many women in the room, I'm sure, my mantra was, I'm never going to say no to an opportunity. And I yes, of course, I will take on this challenge. And, that's not easy, right? There's lots of people on the senior team at the time that supported me and knew the abilities that I had, but there's certainly at least one individual that was a man that had been here for 30 years that felt like it was his position to have. And luckily over time, he probably became my best ally that I've had in my career, and a real solid partnership in the way we dealt with business, and part of the reason why we were so successful. But talk about taking a big gulp and trying to have confidence going into that first executive meeting, knowing that lots of people in the organization were doubting your ability to run an organization. Being the first woman as a CEO at Ontario Northland and the first woman CEO of a Canadian railway at the time, there was doubt in my own mind, and I had to just continually have this self-talk that I could do it. But, it's difficult. And for all the people listening, think about going into a room where there's and when I was a manager, this was the case. There was no director, there was no VP, and there was no CEO that were women. So how on earth do you have confidence to think that you can actually go to those levels if you don't see yourself up there? It's like thinking you're going to see a white rhino tomorrow. It literally eats on your confidence when you don't see yourself. So that's why it's so important that we make changes at the senior level, so that we not only create this diversity in the organization to attract people. When people get into your organization, they see a path forward, that they're not blocked at a certain level. So when I took over, the senior team was really passionate about changing the organization. And luckily, I worked with a lot of people that understood the impact of changing the people and culture. And like many railways, we were really a command and control type organization, not a lot of transparency, not a lot of employee engagement. There were pockets of it for sure, but the mantra became people and culture. And when you talk about diversity and you talk about inclusion, people, diversity, right? Different types of people, but culture is where the inclusion comes in, of making sure that people feel valued and heard. And when we looked at how we were going to transform the organization after 115 years, we wanted to look at new processes, not the way we've always done it. And we wanted to look at new technology. And the only way we were going to get there was thousands of suggestions from the people across this organization, especially frontline people that know what issues we were running into. But we needed that diversity on the people and culture side in order to ensure that when we had suggestions, that they were different And when we had suggestions that they would actually be fulfilled because we had enough people around the table that thought differently and could help us implement those. So here we are in 2022, and proud to say that we have 23% women at Ontario Northland. I believe it's about 11% higher than the rail industry and 10% higher than the trucking industry. And our map, I mean, this is just put up there to show that honestly, I solely believe that part of the reason that we are so successful and why we've expanded to Winnipeg and why we have the confidence of government and why we now do all these stops and have transloads and all the things that we realigned with our passengers and our customers because we talked to them and we listened to what they needed was because we had such diversity around the table. Now I'll stop for a second and just say, you know, how proud am I that we have 2 out of the 10 people around the table that are women? Proud, but sad that that's a proud moment, right? Because there needs to be gender and diversity around, there needs to be gender equity. And we are very, very far from that. And that's why these presentations, and we're so grateful for the Railway Association to take a leadership role, because as we have these conversations, everybody takes away something from these presentations that will change their thinking in the workplace and that will push us forward to be better as an industry and to attract more women. And I don't know any railway right now that doesn't have vacancies that they can't fill. So if we're going to turn our back onto 50% of the population, we have a problem. And so these conversations progress us forward and remind us that this is not going to happen on its own. You know what happens on its own is no change. And that's what happened in 30 years at Ontario Northland to get from 3 or 4% women to 9 or 10% women doing nothing, right? And just having exceptions happen. What we need to do as an industry and as an organization is, first of all, make sure that all the leadership understands the why. Why on earth would you do this? What's in it for the organization? And develop some common language and then make a commitment to change. And so when we start with the why, this is a really interesting thing for any business leader, that if you look at, and you're always scouring industry papers, what is the next thing I can do to be better as an organization so that I can increase my bottom line, right? I can bring more profit in. And every single report you read on diversity and making sure that you have that diverse thinking around the table and diverse perspectives shares that you're going to get a significant increase in your bottom line. So we're all scouring for these ideas, and yet when we come upon them, why wouldn't we act and put all of our focus onto something that can have this much impact on our bottom line? So I think, you know, step one is, do we all think, and do all the leaders of the people on the calls and the leaders that we work with, do they all buy into the fact that there is such merit in doing this? It's not only the right thing. It's not only the fact that we all have vacancies that we need to fill with smart people, and women have to be very smart people. And as I say in many of my presentations, women can drive a train, women can fix trains, women can be electricians. Contrary to popular belief, every single role that we have at Ontario Northland, and probably any organization that's on this call, a woman and a man can do the job. And that's step one, is making sure that leadership understands the impact that it can have in the organization. The next step, I think, is really understanding the why. Like, why is it that organizations do so much better when you have diverse thinking and you have gender equity around the table? And all the reports also reiterate the fact that everyone's, men, women, job satisfaction goes up, morale goes up. The way people feel about coming into work, their safety, everything about the organization goes up when there's gender equity. And, you know, when you look at the reasons why women thrive in life and in business is because of some of the things that are inherently seen in women. They're naturally sincere relationship builders. They are authentic. They're natural nurturers, right? And so I don't want any man on the phone to take, or the call to take offense to this. There's exceptions to every rule. But when we look at generally, men have certain qualities and women have certain qualities, and bringing both of those qualities into the workforce is so very important. Not to mention, and you're probably wondering why I have a picture of an airplane and air traffic controller at the top. I'm going to tell you that before the women get into work, they've already landed 5 planes with all the things that are going on in their life, right? You have your kids, you have lunches, you have day trips, you have doctor's appointments, you are coordinating life. And so that's not something that can't be done at work as well. These skill sets that we think that women don't have are actually logistics extraordinaire. And so I think, for everybody on the phone, we have to recognize the strong attributes and we have to celebrate them, because what happens is sort of what I told you that my story was, that I'm sure that lots of women's story is that you push that stuff down, right? And you don't celebrate it and you don't talk about it because you want to be the same. And then you lose the impact of the differences that you see with men and women in the workplace. So, the first step is develop a common language around this. And so many times I think we see, and I've talked to organizations about this, that they put in place a diversity policy. They even put in some metrics about how many women they want to hire and that type of thing. And the problem is that this is a full cycle of evolution of your organization. It's not just about hiring different people. It's about making sure that they feel genuinely that they are heard and that they are valued around the table. And so you see those 2 pictures there, that really accentuates what we're talking about here. You can hire people, but if they're not heard and they're not valued, you're not getting the impact that you want, and they'll in turn leave. And then, you have all the wasted time of hiring that person. So common language is step 1. Step 2, there are so many biases. I do them. We all do them right now. It's society. And, I hope, if anything, you take note of some of these things to just watch out for. When we talk about allies and you hear some of the other speakers that are going to talk about the significance of that, let's talk about some of these biases and these microaggressions that we see probably every day, right? The walking the tightrope. How many people you've heard a man come into the room and they're very assertive and they're going for it, and then a woman comes in and says the exact same thing in the exact same tone and is labeled as too aggressive. Goes into a performance review and said, I've heard things, you're a bit too aggressive, right? And so we've taught people that people need to be assertive, and then they put this hat on that sometimes doesn't fit them, and then they're labeled as aggressive. So let's make sure that we understand and we're treating people fairly. The next one is proving it. So I've been here. How many times you've been in a meeting where, the person beside you says, here's an idea, and they go, yep, we're doing it automatically. And then the next person is a woman and she says an idea and they're like, I think we better go back to the drawing board. I think you should do some more research. I'm not really sure if we're where we need to be to make that decision, right? It literally is ingrained in us sometimes to want more, which leads to the lack of confidence that women have and the pledge to go into meetings with every single I dotted and T crossed because you want to be ready for the 1,000 questions that you have been given, which is usually unfair. Feeling invisible. Again, as recent as a few years ago, I was at the bargaining table as a lead negotiator and talking and doing the presentation, and was over. The other person around the table happened to be a man, said all of his questions to my male counterpart beside me. And so you feel invisible, you feel like you're inept, you don't have any confidence, you feel angry. So keep note of that. And again, when you're an ally or a sponsor and you see that happening in a meeting, interrupt it, stop it right there, because sometimes people don't recognize what they're doing. Sometimes they do, which is even worse. But I always start with the fact that people don't realize and need to be taken aside and just reminded to be better. And the same with being mistaken at someone for at a lower level. I was in my early days in my career, I was presenting to about 250 engineers. 98% of them are men, I think. And I was about to go and speak. And one of the other speakers came up to me and asked me to go get him some water because he was a speaker. And so just assuming that I had a certain role, again, presses down on your confidence and makes you think, how could I possibly go into a new role and people don't even think I fit this one? And then I'll end with a couple of thoughts here about learning and evolving. And I think one of the things that we as women, and for the men in the room as allies, have to understand the deep differences between men and women and the confidence levels that we each have and how we claim achievements. And confidence, and I know that some of you have heard this before, but I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. My daughter is 18 years old and my sons are 15 and 10. And my daughter's a real smart cookie. She usually gets 90s, but I'll tell you, she's never, ever went into a test or come out of the test thinking that she got a good mark or that she even passed. She never says it, and usually she'll get high 90s. You know, my son, on the other hand, also smart, but not as smart as my daughter, will go in and just be, I got this, mom. You know, his notes are everywhere. Nothing's, you know, organized, and he thinks comes out of it, thinks he's got 100. Gets a good mark, but never as good as my daughter. So you look at those two individuals and you talk about confidence, and you think about a job interview, and who are you going to pick? Are you going to pick the one that, you know, makes you feel so confident in their ability, or the one that's a little bit iffy, right? And so how do we get around those biases when we're talking about recruitment, when we're talking about performance management, we're talking about figuring out who deserves the promotion? And we've only heard from a couple of the men in the place that, you know, have really set out their career path, whereas the women may not have. How do we look out for those things? And that's why allyship is so important, because those men around the table, they know how good you are. They've seen you working. They can have your back when you're not there, and they can have your back when you're sitting around the table together. But those things, they're inherently different in how we sometimes have been raised, and sometimes just not. I mean, my kids have been raised exactly the same, and still so interesting to me how different they are in the areas of confidence and communicating their career goals. So as an action item, I would say to the women in the room, find your voice. It's not easy when you're young in your career, and that's why sponsoring or mentorship is really important. But develop an elevator speech, take 2 minutes to articulate who you are and where you want to go, and practice it with a friend, a mentor, a sponsor. And at the end of it, put bet on me, right? Because sometimes you're not going to have the best resume because you haven't had an opportunity to get the best resume for all the things we've been talking about. And I love the line of bet on me, because there's so many smart women that deserve the opportunity to share and be the person that they can be in the workplace. And practice communicating your achievements. I don't like it to this day. I hate hearing about I don't like talking about it. And so you need to practice it with somebody you trust. And then for all the moms and for all the caregivers to their parents out there, get rid of the guilt. I call it mom guilt. And lots of people I've talked to said, you know, I didn't have any guilt until I became a mom. And then all of a sudden you have to make decisions. Do I choose my child? Do I choose work? I used to work 12 hours a day. Now I can only work 8. And I know, speaking from experience, I just wanted to do it all. I didn't want anything to fall short. I'd get up in the middle of the night. I'd make those damn amazing cupcakes that you had to bring to the picnic like every other mother. You know, it's tough to balance all those things, and we have to give ourselves a break. And by the way, when you give yourself a break, you're allowing other people in your life to make an impact, right? You're allowing your husband or partner to be more with your children. You're allowing your parents to play a more role. And I'm saying that I could never do my job if it wasn't for all these wonderful people around me that now have a different relationship with my children because of the role that I have here. But for a long time, all I wanted to do was all of it with no one's help, because I equated that to being a good mom. And that's really stressful. And I think those are some of the conversations that we need to have with the young women, to let them be themselves and understand that family time is so very important. So I'll leave you with this slide. The biggest thing I think is, this is not an HR problem. This is a business problem. This is an issue that we all have to deal with to really move the marker in this industry and in society globally. So set your key performance indicators, be very specific quantitatively. How many women, how many gender, like, we want people that it's not just about women and men, it's about age, it's about sexuality, it's about race, it's about culture. All of those different thoughts around the table are what is going to just catapult you into greatness as an organization. But set some specifics with data about where you are and where you want to be, or you'll never achieve it because you don't have a path forward. And just try to continually improve. I mean, we're digging into HR processes right now and finding biases all over the place, right? When you've been around for 100+ years, they're in there. And sometimes you don't even know it. We changed the way we post engineers and conductors. We realized there was terminology in there that wasn't understood by women. Doesn't mean that they can't do the job and we can't train them appropriately. And, you know, one of the things that we're going to do, and we haven't done it yet, and I know Cindy, who's in the organization, has been pushing me on this, and she's a great woman leader in our organization, to set up a mentor program. And the biggest thing there is to realize that the mentor program doesn't have to be that it's women only. You don't have to have a mentor or an ally that's a woman. In fact, if we don't have men that are allies and sponsors, we will never get there, because the reality is that 80 to 90% of the decision makers who can be mentors and allies are men. So for all the men out there, take a note and be an ally. These are the ways that we're going to literally change the percentage overnight if we really take note and everybody takes a leading role in making sure we change the industry. And just, I also just talking about it, right? Raising awareness and having these days so that we can all get together and just remind ourselves how very important this strategy is. And thank you very much for having me today. So to be honest, I didn't do a lot until recently because I didn't have the confidence to speak up about it. And I was too worried of the impact. And so that's why I'm so passionate about having these presentations so many times a year, because I want to make up for lost time. And I was lucky enough, and that's why I'm so supportive of this concept of men being allies in the workplace, because I happen to, just as luck would have it, worked with some wonderfully supportive men in my career. And I wouldn't be here today if they didn't not see any gender inequity. And they just supported me throughout my career and really had my back when I wasn't in the room, and it gave me opportunities that I never would have had without them being there. And that's why I think the biggest thing that someone can do is seek those people out and have that conversation with them and say, like, you know, do you support me? Is there things that you would change about how I do things? Because I need your back. And if I could go back in time, that would be the conversation that I would have. But I was lucky and fortunate enough to come across those unexpectedly.
I'm really pleased to be speaking alongside these really impressive group of business people who just happen to be women. And also thanks to the RAC for bringing us all together. It's a really important topic. And also an enthusiastic shout out to former colleagues on the line. There's so many great railway women who work tirelessly to make everything come together day after day. And they definitely deserve our recognition and our thanks. And a hearty welcome to the men on the phone. A couple of you have reached out to me, told me you were going to be here today. So thank you for coming out. And you're an important part of this conversation because it's really not just about women. It's about the sustainability of the rail industry. And that's why this is an important topic. Also, quite simply, it's 2022. Time for us to change that 10%. So I think Corinna hit on it really nicely, Jennifer, that, you know, diversity in the corporate workplace is not just a nice to have. You know, it's not just a line in your annual report. It has to be something that becomes part of our DNA, and it's good for business, it's good for profits, and it's good for any healthy, sustainable corporation. And we also recognize that we're going through a demographic and cultural shift in the workplace, particularly following in the wake of COVID. And railroads are competing and need to attract the best employees. If you're an employer and you're not making yourself attractive and open to women and to people of diverse backgrounds, you're fishing in a much smaller pond. Why limit yourself to half of the population? There's a full-on war for talent these days, and railroads are some of the most labor-intensive industries in Canada. Very little happens on a railway without people. So mentoring of women and putting programs in place and making the industry more female friendly is about our survival, and it's about being a sustainable corporation and industry. I spent 30 years in the rail industry, and like Corinna, I was often the only woman in the room. And things are changing. I'm delighted they're changing. But the truth remains, the rail industry is still very male-dominated. It's a male-dominated culture, and that needs to change, and that needs to come into 2022. And if I may add, I do want to just I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. It is changing, And, you know, my former employer has made a huge stride on the gender front, particularly in the last few years. The new CEO is a woman, the chair of the board is a woman, there's more women throughout the company. And that's great. And that's not just good luck. You know, that means that that's a corporation that's modernizing and listening to shareholders and customers and employees, and you know, working hard to reflect the diversity of the larger population. So good job, CN, keep doing it. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure, that'd be great. If I could actually leap on what Fiona said, I really like the way you put it, that there's a war on talent. I would say we're all experiencing the same thing. And certainly from my perspective, we've been trying to hire to get back to resumption of service, and there really is a war on talent, be it at all levels of talent that we're looking for. So to take your point, Fiona, we do have to become attractive. We have to make women believe there's a career to be had, that there's opportunity to grow within our organization, within the rail industry. And I think that's really important to start talking. And Karina mentioned it before, in that it has to be possible or visibly possible. So to the point of that, you know, our board of directors, majority are women. Our execs, our senior execs, we have gender parity. Our senior roles, the same thing. So we do have that. Where we're lacking now, and we're finding that we really have to focus is in middle management, and then skilled trades and technicians. So we do have gaps in different areas, and that's really where we have to start looking at how do we talk to the resources that are out there looking for jobs right now. How do we make ourselves attractive to make them believe that they can come in as a locomotive engineer if they want to, they can come in as a mechanical technician. And if they want to stay there, that's fantastic. If they want a career and they want to move somewhere else within the organization, we have to create paths that enable them to take those opportunities and to do that. In order to do that, we have to show them examples of how that's possible. So I think it's not one thing that's going to fix it, but I think the conversation is important, where we have to tap into several different things that we're talking about, which is, you know, you got your role models, you have the development plan, you have to understand what the needs of this new young workforce coming in is like, because it's different from, never mind men and women, the younger workforce is different from what we started with. They have different needs, and COVID changed that even more than we expected it to. So we have to continually have a conversation to make sure that the needs that are being fulfilled by the organization are equally being met by the needs that are being fulfilled for the actual employees we're trying to hire.
Yeah, so just to, you know, Karina definitely had talked about it, which was incredibly inspiring. I think I clapped all by myself on mute a couple of times, but exactly what, you know, both Fiona and Rita had touched on. Everything that has come, you know, before today was a path that was bulldozed, I'll say, by everyone before us. And I really do believe that we are in the middle of a massive shift. And to Rita's point, we need to now focus on getting those young women, any women, into our industry. Because to be perfectly frank, when I look around, whether or not it's out in the field, or especially when it's out in the field, I just don't see the demographic out there that I know, that we all know. Everybody who's a railroader knows what they can bring to the table. And I think that there is a gap in attracting and convincing people and demonstrating to them that we have a lot to offer in the railroad industry. We have, you know, this will always be an important conversation for all of us to have, our entire industry, all industries. There's definitely more appreciation from, you know, enlightened parties, industries, the different leaders that we all interact with, that mentorship, leadership is as important as our policies, procedures, budgets, practices. And we need to take this to the next level of our evolution, and really work at attracting and retaining talent that we have something to offer and they have something to bring to the table as well.
Thank you to the Rail Association of Canada for the organization of this event and the Women in Rail Network for the invitation. It's an honor to be part of a group of women like you, co-panelists, and also congratulations to Corina for a fantastic presentation this morning. It launched the session very well. I mean, you know, we're part of I'm the CTA, the Canadian Transportation Agency, is part of the federal government. And I mean, we are clearly a bit more representative than the rail industry overall. We have been, you know, and I think, you know, as a federal organization, we have the duty to represent the country that we serve. So diversity objectives have been important. And we are also now particularly trying to go beyond gender representativity, but also, you know, target other groups that are underrepresented in the federal government. I think it's, I don't want to add to what has already been said, because I think that my co-panelists have been quite eloquent, but I also think that we cannot, in our case, take anything for granted, right? It's not because we have, particularly with respect to gender, I would say, reached a certain level that we should not pay attention to that. I really think that it's still fragile in terms of the progress that we have made. I think it's important for younger women to see women in leadership position. I think it's important to make sure that we also, you know, look at the workspace and look at the workplace that we offer. I also think that generationally, you know, appealing to women is also going to appeal to men, because as I would agree that I think it's Rita who mentioned, there are different expectations, and COVID has certainly led to that. So continuing that, you know, that dialogue, continuing to learn about lessons that we each have in our organization is very important.
I think mentorship is really an integral core function of most aspects of what I do. Hopefully what we all do, I'm sure what we all do, to have that commitment to both giving, receiving mentorship, and the recognition that it is the path to our growth, right? Our development, our path to leadership, you know, both the development of and maturing leadership. So always seeking those opportunities through, you know, observing others, how they interact with people, how they carry themselves, how they interact with groups, how they fulfill their role, just to be able to identify, can I play a role in the progression of what they can accomplish the way that so many have for me? Or alternatively, can those parties play a part in my progression, in my leadership development? So really just always actively keeping it on the forefront in each interaction that you have on what we can mutually give and receive in order to develop each other.
Sure, I'd be happy to jump in. I guess I look at mentorship quite simplistically in that it's about a conversation, and you have to listen to the person you're speaking with. One, to find out, do they want to be mentored in the first place? And two, do you know them well enough? So you need to spend time getting to know the individual, building a level of trust such that when they have a problem, they're working through something, they're going to talk to you about it. And it doesn't have to be formal, it can be informal. It can be with your own team, it can be with people outside of your team that you built up a relationship with, that suddenly you happen to be bumping in the hallway and they have a conversation with you because they're working through something that's really bothering them. And then you realize, oh, I'm mentoring somebody. So it's about creating a connection and a conversation that allows for people to display their vulnerabilities or their concerns in a way that they don't feel scared. And as such, obviously it helps. It's self-fulfilling, or it helps. It's a two-way street because you end up feeling good because somebody trusted you enough to ask you advice in the first place. But Lisa's right. I think it works both ways, because the more you help people, the more you offer them development opportunities, it helps you in your job. Let's face it, if all of a sudden there's one position that's available and you can figure out, instead of just filling that one position, you can shuffle 3 people. You give 3 people development opportunities. That helps you on your team. It helps the company. You actually help your own career doing it the same way. So there is a benefit from a personal perspective, but I think there's a bigger benefit as well in terms of seeing, like I said, if you can shuffle 3 people in doing that and offer them opportunities, I think that's really where the value comes in at the end.
Sure, I can't, go ahead, Fiona, I'll go
No,
after.
I see. Okay. Well, I was just going to say, I'm a happily pensioned off railroader these days, but I have the opportunity to continue coaching and mentoring, and I've sought those opportunities out, and I get as much out of it as hopefully those that I'm mentoring do. It's sort of mentoring is that 2-for-1 deal. So it keeps me plugged in, it gives me enormous, satisfaction to help others, men and women. And I agree with Rita, it is a conversation. Many mentees really are just looking for someone to kind of listen and guide them a bit and make sure that they're not, the only one sort of thinking those thoughts. And I think the fancy word is mentorship, but really it's about caring and putting time into each other. And I think we could all do a lot more of that these days.
Thank you. I was just going to add, I think the previous generation of women certainly had a thicker glass ceiling to break, right? So I was lucky that there were some pioneers before me who then mentored me. That being said, when I became an executive in the federal government, was the late 1990s. I was with the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, and at that time there was maybe about 100 executives. And when I joined, I think I was the 4th woman. So there were 4 women out of 100 executives. So it was, being able to turn to other senior women to help me go through. I will remember the first one of the there was somebody who was senior than me. The first thing she says, well, France, you're a woman, you need to really take care of yourself because you're going to be really careful. And if you don't think about your health, about, doing exercise, about eating well, and about, making sure that you have a good social and family support, you're not going to survive that. And this has always stick with me. So I think these are, advice that are probably still valid. But in terms of mentorship, the way I look at it too is you have the long-term relationship. So having some relationship with people that over a long period of time that you follow and that you continue to help. But I also think it's important to have more punctual mentorship when you see an opportunity to really help someone, whether it be I'm in Vancouver today actually, and just did a tour of terminals of Port of Vancouver and with the industry, and we made sure that we brought some junior people with us to do those tours, to expose them to them and to have the opportunity to have the informal chat that you have when you do industry visits.
So I'll start with saying that, in terms of programs within CANDO for mentoring women, 70% of our leadership team that reports directly to our president and CEO are women. So we've also had 23 women go through our leadership development program. So we're pretty proud of that. From a pure program perspective, mentoring applies across all people at CANDO. So that is our mandate. However, our culture and our people do understand how women are capable and can contribute in a meaningful way. And that is obviously through demonstration, right? We do have those, a multitude of women in those positions, and that's that demonstration that we do have that culture that understands. Leadership development and the mentorship there is structure to it to give meaningful learnings, both with, I'll say, hard skills and soft skills, to be able to develop all people in leadership roles and to understand what that means, as well as obviously mentorship. So I know for myself, I'm always thrilled whether or not it's someone else has identified to go through our leadership development program, or someone that I can witness who has the potential for it. When you find a woman, especially who's got a passion, is inquisitive, hardworking, that I think naturally builds, my drive, and I'm sure builds everyone else's drive to want to contribute to that success and to find opportunities, make sure that they are in those programs to help hone and develop those skills.
We don't actually have a formal mentorship program within Via Rail right now. We informally have been working with mentorship roles, most specifically probably with new people coming into the organization through onboarding, and we identify somebody who will be their mentor, who will kind of take them through the initiation process, help them move around and get through that way. I think it's more informal. The point was raised by Fiona, where we have some key people who happen to be role models, and they get tapped for advice and building relationship and so forth. One thing we recently embarked upon, it's external, but I think it gives visibility to some of our key people from the VIA perspective. We partnered up with an organization called Academos, which is based out of Montreal. So it's a French platform, and basically it pairs young people looking for career. They're trying to make choices in terms of where they're going to go with their future, and they partner them with people in industry. So we've identified, and we have actually 11 active members that are part of that, and they work and they respond through the platform to questions about what the industry is about, how to consider what career options you'd be looking for. And at the same time, in doing that, in order to, I guess, promote it, we created some videos where we honed in on 3 particular people. One of them in particular is one of my team, and they did a video about their experience at Via Rail, and then we posted that on social media and trying to promote the program, but at the same time trying to highlight the individual who's done an amazing job within the organization to talk about from a role model perspective, and here's what's possible for young people coming in, but also to highlight that within the organization. So I think we're moving our way towards trying to come up with something more structured around mentorship. But in the meantime, we're looking at different things, both internal and external, in terms of how to raise the level of awareness about the success and the caliber of women within the organization, and how to start attracting, like I said, young people from outside.
Okay, no, that's fine. So what I wanted to say was on programs is we certainly have quite a few programs within the federal government. We are a small agency compared to the big federal family. That being said, we are about to have a mentorship program that will target various groups of people that we want to increase the representativity of Canada. So essentially it's women, it's people with disability, it's also people coming from visible minority groups, and also people coming from indigenous communities. So that's will be target. At the same time, I think that at some point we also need to open this up a little bit more, even more, but to be more structured, we will start there.
Great question. Well, first of all, I'd say get on board the train, all aboard. This is a fascinating industry, whether it be class 1, short lines, passenger, commuter. This is an industry that is absolutely plugged into every aspect of Canadian life. So, you're not just going to learn about the railroads, you're going to learn about the economy, you're going to learn about how Canada works, you're going to learn about government, interprovincial trade. It's just a fascinating industry and a fabulous learning environment. I always tell people who are interested in joining the industry, if you're curious and you want to know how things work and fit together, it's a great dynamic and interesting workplace for that. You're never going to have a dull day, ever. In the 30 years that I worked at CN, never had a dull day. Not always a good day, but never a dull day. And there's industries that are easier. There's definitely places that are easier to work than in the rail industry. But I think if, there's a curiosity about you and you want to work in a team, it's a great industry for that. You'll you won't come into the industry knowing everything, and you learn something new every day. I don't think it's even realistic to think that you'll know everything about the industry, but you can have multiple careers in the rail industry. It's not, well, obviously there's the operations side, which first comes to mind, but there's also, there's the legal department, there's the HR department, there's the environmental department, there's sales and marketing, there's communications. These are all support functions that make the wheels on the railway continue. And I think people maybe don't always consider those. And I guess, you can have multiple careers. I did, people find it, fascinating that I started in the library. But, that was kind of a shoe in the door. And, I ended up working in procurement. I worked many years in sales and marketing, and then moved into public government affairs, corporate communications. So over 30 years, I had 4 or 5 different careers. And I think that's still the case for the rail industry today. So, I think we have to do a better job of engaging with young people, young women, people of diverse backgrounds, young men, and get them to think about the rail as they come out of university as a fascinating place to work, and a place where you can have a long and very successful and multifaceted career.
I'm very new to the rail industry in the sense I've been appointed a year ago, and this is not an industry I knew very well until I was appointed. And what strikes me from the industry, and what I would tell is how people that are in it are absolutely passionate about it. When we have some rail specialists in our organization that have devoted their career to rail and know everything inside out, and have been extraordinarily valuable to me, of course, since I've been there, but I have started to meet with the rail industry, and the passion that this industry gets out of people is remarkable. And so I think what we need is to encourage people to maybe keep an open mind and discover this industry and the career that it offers, because I personally find that, you need, like, work is a big part of our lives, and we need to like what we do, and we need to be passionate about what we do. And this industry clearly triggers that out of the people working in it.
What would I say to a young woman? Be more courageous than afraid. So I spent the majority of my railway career in operations. I started off as a conductor, locomotive engineer, went into management. But with every step in the progression of my career, there were moments that I was terrified. Whether it was the first time I'd switched a rail car by myself. I vividly remember the first time I kicked off the brake on my very first trip as a qualified locomotive engineer. And definitely remember the first time I made a presentation to a CEO. I was very afraid, but I was so determined. What I would say is know yourself, be true to who you are and what you bring to the table. Be courageous, determined to work hard to get noticed for who you are and what you bring to the table. There will be times where you'll find that what you have to offer, what you have to contribute, maybe everything isn't lining up for you in that moment. So be courageous again and learn what you need to learn to be invited to the table. If that doesn't work, find a new table. I think that there's some misconceptions at times out there, at least in my experience, that there may be an occasion as a woman that you're not accepted, that you're not as, Karina had touched on it, you're not as strong to perform labor-intensive tasks. I've been in the rail industry for a really long time. I don't know if I've ever worked with a peer in this industry that didn't accept me. They might not have liked me, the two different things, right? But they accepted it and respected me. When you're not as strong, you work smarter. When you don't know, to ask. There really is a shift in the industry that there is recognition from all parties, you know, men and women, that women are just as capable. And if you can put that fear behind you and be more courageous and brave and hardworking, really, you know, like Fiona had touched on, you can do anything.
Yeah, well, you just took my line. You said create your own table. I was going to say, yeah, if you can't set your own table and put some people at the table that you want to have a conversation with, and that's how it all gets started.
Rita,
But,
we're gonna make our own table at the end of
exactly, it's going to be big.
There you go.
But the industry itself, like Fiona touched on it, everybody's touched on it in a different way. There's lots of opportunity. It's multifaceted. It's not one thing. And certainly from a passenger rail perspective, it's about people. So it's not just about moving the trains. The trains are there to move the people, and everybody is connected to the people that we're connecting across Canada. So if you have a passion for people, you can support that by being a locomotive engineer, by working on the trains, because that's what supports moving the people, by creating the communities. So jump into an industry, even if you're not 100% sure about it, knowing that it has lots of different facets to it. And where you start is not necessarily where you're going to end up 5 years down the road, because there are opportunities. It's not necessarily linear. You can be weaving your way through the system. But what I really liked was what Lisa, you were talking about, be courageous, because some of those things, first off, recognize you're not alone. Everybody here who's speaking went through those moments where we're all terrified when we took a job and went, oh my God, am I actually able to do this or not? It happens. But know that every time you put yourself in that position and you take that deep breath and you do it, you build a little bit more confidence. So you do it again and you're still scared, but the reality is, you know, you build credibility with yourself to say, oh, I did it the last time, I'll figure it out this time. So know that even if you do a lateral and you go somewhere else to another area of the industry where you have to learn something new, you're going to be able to learn it. You're smart, you're capable, you're flexible. Look at your base skills about how you work. It's not always about the technical pieces of it. It's how you want to learn. And I think this industry has a lot to offer that way. And I think the industry is recognizing that we need to do more to develop and allow for opportunities for people to move within the industry over time, especially with the newer, younger generation, because there's a lot of expectation. And I think our challenge, quite honestly, in the future is going to be holding on to people for a longer period of time. The newer generation is going to have multiple careers. You know, we are in an industry where people stayed 30, 40. I have somebody who's going to be coming up on 50 years. Those things happened. I think that's going to be less and less. So we have to be attractive, but we have to stay relevant as we grow and as we move into the future too.
Sure, I could. I have to say, not being in the industry itself, except of course for the part, I'm not sure I'm the best place to answer that, but like what I find with, again, and it's part of my own discovery right over the last year, I find this industry has a very, I would say, fascinating history, right? It is part of the history of the country. And I think it's Fiona who mentioned that. And it's therefore part of the future of the country as well. So for me, this is something that, of course, maybe because I'm a public servant, and of course, if I was not interested in the future and the past of the country, I might have chosen a different profession. But I find that this is something pretty unique to that industry, because it's really at the foundation, you know, of what Canada is. And I do think that this is something that can be part of the attraction and the passion that this industry generates.
Yeah, I think you're right, France. I think, you know, people quickly learn when they're working in this industry that it's entirely interwoven into the success of Canada. And look at the supply chain issues that the world is facing right now. You know, the rail industry has a lot of solutions to offer there. So I think that would be attractive. And, you know, I think some of the things that potential hires need to know about the industry, other than it's never going to be a dull day, this industry isn't for shrinking violets. You know, it's it's like I said, there's easier places to work. You know, the culture I grew up in, and it is changing a bit, but it's for people that want to jump in the deep end without a lot of hand holding. It's 24/7, 365. That doesn't mean there's not an opportunity for work-life balance, but you know, you do need flexibility. And you know, Corinna, when she was, you know, talking about how she came up through the ranks and up to CEO level, you know, you have to come up with ways of being able to adapt to an industry that's constantly faced with challenges. It's an outdoor sport, as we say in the industry, and that can change your life minute by minute. So, you know, if you're interested in that sort of fast-paced, all hands on deck kind of industry, again, it's a fascinating one. It's also an industry where people are going to learn constantly. You know, I learned up until the very last day that I was at CN, and that you know, really was something that I got out of the company that I enjoyed immensely. You know, you're not going to learn everything. You have to count on the expertise of your colleagues. And I think that creates a lot of very strong teamwork in the rail industry. You know, there's an integration of all the functions that has to come together. And again, if you know, sort of like to see how things come together and form a whole, it's a great industry for that. And I think people who do well in this industry are those who network, who are good at not just teamwork, but jumping in when the time is needed. And it's not an industry, in my experience anyway, where people are going to take a lot of time to sort of invite you in. You just have to be someone who jumps in and makes a go of it. And that sometimes is not something that women are that comfortable with. And you have to push yourself. You know, there were times when I thought, you know, I'm not sure that's my place. Men don't really say that to themselves. They just get in there. And I think that's where, you know, becoming a railroad woman, and they are a special breed, you know, you sort of push yourself out of your comfort zone, and a little bit, like Lisa was saying, be brave, you know, and do something that maybe terrifies you, but ends up being you know, something that builds your confidence. And, you know, I think there's a place very much for women in leadership at railways. It's time for the industry to be maybe a bit kinder and gentler. And, but at the same time, don't mistake that women aren't hardcore, and that they don't have what it takes to run a railroad. Absolutely, they do. And it's about being able to draw on experiences, pull people in, make decisions on the fly. And, you know, if there's one thing I know about women, that's kind of what we're made to do. And we do it every day. So,
a potential hire, you know, so I have a different experience, right? From potentially from that, you know, hiring point, because I was hired as a conductor. And so a little bit maybe more specific and pinpointed, and going back to my experiences, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. And I knew I had to try to find balance. And I love this panel, and Karina, you know, one of the first times I've ever had an opportunity to listen to the transparency surrounding the work-life balance, which is just, yeah, I was rah-rahing all over by myself over here. But, you know, for my experience, and for a lot of people looking to get in rail, that does mean being that signal maintainer. It does mean being the conductor. It does mean, you know, being the road foreman, or, the maintenance of way worker. And that means irregular hours at times, nights, weekends, on call. And, you know, to give that advice that you need to take advantage of the downtime and make the most of it for your family and for yourself. When I had first entered, my son was young. He was probably, oh goodness, 6 or 7. I was afraid that my career change was going to severely impact my family. I learned really quick that it only impacted my family if I let it. I had to adopt the mindset that I would not obsess over waiting for the phone to ring when I was on call, or being preoccupied with what's coming next, what's the next project, what's the next train. When I gave up trying to control and was present and took part in what was important in those moments, then I found the balance. But imperfect, to be perfectly honest, it took me a couple of years to get there. And then, you know, both the family and the professional, it just all started to come together. But just for the passionate side of it, you know, so like Franz had touched on, we're all passionate in the railway industry. The most important thing I would tell them, though, is that it's an unbelievable ride. This industry will shape who you are. It will push you beyond anything that you thought was achievable. With hard work, determination, the opportunities for personal advancement are endless. And when I say personal advancement, what I'm talking about isn't, you know, that brass ring. It's about what you're passionate about, you know, and Rita had touched on, maybe it's lateral, maybe it's over here, maybe it is up. But that personal satisfaction will come from what the determination that you have and the opportunities that you find in making those happen. Being able to move into logistics, you know, labor relations, like the rail industry has all of these subcategories and you know, micro specialties that, you know, you may be out switching rail cars and you get a touch of logistics or procurement or customer service, and you look for that mentor who's going to help you get to what you're discovering you're passionate about. And your passions will change. I can promise you, 12, 15 years ago, I never thought my passion would be safety. You know, my passion was moving rail cars or moving trains fast, or, you know, whatever it may be, but there's all of these subcultures, and, you know, you will find something that you're passionate about. Hopefully you stay within the rail industry and you find, you know, that job that you love waking up for every day and you have that personal balance with. But those are also opportunities that, you know, maybe you will go into one of those, you know, subcultures like labor relations or customer service, and maybe it will take you outside of rail, but finding what you're passionate about in the railway industry, it will be an unbelievable ride. It's very exciting.
Awesome. Thank you. Rita?
Oof, lots of great words of wisdom to start with. Maybe just to say, you know, what would I do to, what would I offer to shape them within the industry? I like what Fiona said. Yeah, it's never dull. Absolutely not, because things are always moving, people are moving, and we have to make things work, because either there's a customer waiting for a freight train to show up because they need something that's going to go into a store, or somebody's on their way to a wedding and we need to make sure they get there on time. So there's lots of different pressures around it, but the sense of satisfaction in actually getting to delivering what we're supposed to deliver to the customer in whatever manner that happens to be is exceptionally exhilarating. So if you want something that is not dull, this is the place for you. And I think anybody new getting into the industry now is I think in a perfect position, especially young women coming in. Help us shape the industry, because instead of, Don't come in and get shaped by it. Help us shape it, because I think it has changed over, and we have a number of years of experience within the industry here, and it has evolved. But I think we can help accelerate it a little bit more now. We're in a position where if we can bring more people in that have the same level of passion that we do, and they have a slightly different view of what the future can look like, well, maybe we can provide some support to them, and they can help us look at it a little bit more differently than we have in the past. And like I said, there's not one solution in terms of the type of career you can have. As long as you're willing and you're the one, don't wait for somebody to ask if you want something else. And, we talk about set your own table, do whatever, but at the same time, put your hand up and say, I've done this. I'm really happy with what I've done here. I want to try something different. And feel free to ask for that on an ongoing basis. And it doesn't always have to be the big promotion, but it could be just a project. Maybe you're really happy with where you're working, but you want to understand the industry a little bit better. Get on a project team, and you can find balance that way. And the last thing I would say is, given that it is never dull, the industry has been working, I would say, quite diligently. We have been doing the same thing, trying to put in support and tools for wellness and well-being, and trying to find balance in things, because we know that sometimes it's hard to disconnect. And we have to get better at doing that, because you have to take care of yourself in order so that we can take care of each other. And I think it's really important that we put all those things together to create an industry that is going to continue to evolve.
Thank you. Well, there's certainly a former deputy minister of mine who was a great mentor. First of all, I had a lot of admiration for who she was and for how she was managing and running organizations. And what I liked that she did with me is she did not like to, I would say, reproduce herself in me, which would not have been possible anyway, because she was really extraordinary. But also try to therefore understand me, understand my own motivation, understand my strength, and direct me, and not direct me, but help me see that, and help me direct myself towards, other jobs that could be of interest and where I could succeed. But she was also, I would say, for me, a safe space where I could go and confide and be really, share with her what I was going through when I was going through some difficulties, or where I needed advice, and where I knew I would not be judged, but I would have somebody there to rely on and to really fully support me. So she was a great mentor model, which I try to reproduce a little bit when I model myself, people myself. But for me, I have a kind of I call this the 3 Ps, and I heard that in another context. It's a power, permission, protection. So what I try to do is to, first of all, I would say, give some form of energy and push a little bit and challenge a little bit those who I mentor, so that they go, a little bit beyond themselves and see things that they would not see otherwise. And I link this to give them the permission to go outside the box, to really think beyond what they're currently living or what they're currently thinking. And the third one is protection, and sometimes it's to protect them a little bit against themselves, and to warn them, and to make sure that, again, they have a safe haven to come and talk, and where they will not be judged.
Sure. Well, you don't make it through 30 years in this business on your own. What do they say? It takes a village to raise a child. And I was really just a kid out of university when I started in the rail industry, and very fortunate to come across some great mentors, and many of them men, most of them men, because there weren't any women. And they probably didn't think of themselves as formal mentors. There was no formal mentor program. It was pretty organic, but each one, played an important role in my success. And these people, they saw something in me and gave me opportunities to learn, to build my confidence, to take on new responsibilities, to move up into more senior roles. And I think one of the things that, people should think about is it's a mix of mentors. There's not going to be one person that's your everything. And that probably isn't very healthy anyway. You have to seek out mentors or people to mentor from different parts of organizations. And, I think of, also a very big source of support for me was the other women at CN and the mentorship and support that we gave each other. Some senior, some junior, didn't really matter. What brought us together was that we were this little secret sisterhood, and we went out of our way to help each other, to give each other honest feedback, to be a place where we could share our miseries and commiserate in a safe environment, but also to kind of get some honest feedback. It was a great sort of source of comfort to be able to turn to each other on a regular basis. So I think women need to absolutely help other women. It's nice to open the door, but you got to keep the door open, and you've got to help each other, whether it be a lateral move or a more senior move, or just a place to be able to speak to each other in confidence. So I think that's very important. And I also think, as a mentor, I put a lot of effort into mentoring folks as I, became more senior. It's good for the company. It's good for engagement. As a leader, I'd even argue that's what you're paid to do. So, you need to be taking interest in younger people and bringing them along so that they fill your shoes, they surpass you. I mean, what is more satisfying than building someone up and seeing them rise? So for those of on the line today that think they might like to be a mentor, Google it. It's not complicated. It's about a relationship where you invest in somebody else's success, and that's a great thing for the company, for the culture of the company, and it's a great thing for the mentor. You get a lot out of it. And I think passing on your knowledge and helping people build their skill sets and their confidence is a great part of the job. So I would encourage people to do it.
Oh, I don't know how I'm going to follow that. It would just, yeah. Well, so I've had several great mentors throughout my career, very much like Fiona. I believe almost all of them were men. I have had some phenomenal champions throughout my career, and I wouldn't be where I am today without them. Some of them, very much in the same light. Some were formal, others informal. I love the analogy. It's very much treated a lot in the same light as we do with our friendships. So I really did like that analogy. So one of my great mentors was someone I trusted. I knew I had a voice with to ask questions. Most importantly, I always trusted him to be honest, even when I hurt, even when I didn't want to hear it, even when it was going to be hard. A lot of trust and integrity that I had in him, and in that relationship. I was smiling because it's nostalgia, right? And you will change them throughout your career. This one in particular would never give me a solution to an issue, even if I was insistent, but would walk me through the process of providing my own answers to give me that sense of empowerment, and always celebrated that I had figured it out. Now that I'm a little bit older and wiser, I can look back and go, "Oh, you tricky one, you." But yeah, I was always left empowered. I always caution people, at least in my experience, it may feel natural to look to your boss as a mentor. I think that's maybe the exception more so than the rule, just because it may not necessarily be the best fit for what you need. There might be times where you need that mentor, and if you are just starting your mentorship journey and you have one or two, asking your boss some of those real development questions that you need to ask, it may end up creating conflict, right? Depending on the issue. Your boss has a mandate to follow, and of course, leadership and development is a part of that, but there's everything else that comes into our careers as well. So I always urge people to look outside and find that person who urges you to think bigger and build confidence and competence, right? So someone who will sees that big picture on who you are and who you can accomplish, even when you don't. So.
I agree with what everyone said. I think it does take a number of people that help shape you over time. Early in my career, I was fortunate. I had two particular people, one man, one woman, who I guess taught me a couple lessons, which I didn't quite understand them completely, but I realized that I incorporated them into what I do after the fact. But the one woman who I worked for at the beginning, she was really good at pushing just enough to put me in a position where I was uncomfortable. Like I had to make this presentation. I didn't think I was ready because I was only with the company for a short period of time. And she was putting me in front of a whole bunch of people I didn't quite think I would be speaking to at that point. And she did it, one, to develop me, but two, she did it to recognize the work that I'd done. And when I saw what other peers she had at that level, they weren't putting people forward. They were presenting on behalf of their team, which is a different way of doing it. So the person's more in control. But on the other hand, she allowed me to develop and she showcased my talents, which I wouldn't have had the opportunity to showcase otherwise. Perhaps to the detriment of her because she wasn't front and center potentially with the executives. But I looked at that from the perspective that she built her team that way by recognizing talent and putting it forward whenever possible. And the other individual who was, I always thought he was very annoying at the time. He was one of our executives and we were working on these projects and we had to do this analysis on strategy and so forth. And we'd go into his office and we thought we'd nailed it with all these great ideas of what we were going to plan and propose. And then he'd say, well, what if this? And you'd sit there and go, okay, so you'd answer that question. He goes, what if this? He always had a what if, no matter what we came up with, he had a what if. Because no matter how good you think you are and how exhaustive you think you are, there's always something you haven't thought of. It was one of those, take it down a notch to realize you need to talk to several people to socialize it so they can see it from different perspectives. And I think that's where I kind of bring it back to have different voices at the table because they will offer solutions you won't get if you have everybody coming at it from a cookie cutter perspective. You need people from breadth of knowledge within the organization and breadth of experience in life that can ask different types of questions. So when you're in a position and you're not sure whether this is the right thing or not, think of a what if question and it might lead you in a different fact.
I think I think it's definitely a full circle issue. So I think that it does not matter what role you participate in. If you use the sort of stereotypical, down here or up here, everybody needs to be involved in mentoring someone else. I have had mentors that were the right mentor at that point in time in my career that helped, developed, and shaped, even though they may be working, say, beneath in a hierarchy perspective. And that's a good thing. That's an okay thing. So it doesn't matter who you are. Everyone needs to make a concerted effort to have a conversation. It can be one of the hardest, most, unnatural. It shouldn't necessarily be that, would you be my mentor, please? Like Fiona had said, it's just very much like, almost like striking up a friendship, and investing that time. And it's one of the most beneficial things that we can all give. So reach out, ask a woman, ask a man that you come across about themselves, engage them. Take the time. Time is one of the most important resources that we all have, and have a conversation about that. See the potential that they don't know is there yet. And for those people, take advantage of that opportunity. This industrial landscape doesn't even necessarily need to be railroading. It is in the middle of a shift, and leaders have a genuine interest in your development and making a difference. We won't move forward without that. So if you don't see engagement coming from someone, engage them. Don't be discouraged. If they don't have the time in that moment to interact with you, to be fully engaged, we're all human. We can have other momentary priorities or distractions. Ask them, when's a good time to reach out? Like to just talk to you about a couple of things, make it easy, but don't let it go. See that as an opportunity that will take you in a direction that you probably won't even see coming. So
I guess I could add, this is a great time to speak to men on the phone. It's a great way to show your support for women in the workplace. And, you may not know what it's exactly like to be a woman, but, certainly everybody wants a supportive and inclusive workplace. And I think, especially in this industry, I don't know if it was Karina that said it's 80%, male dominated. There's a lot of men in this industry that know a lot of stuff that they can be sharing. And, whatever you're hearing about the downside of it, or the potential pitfalls, put it aside. You're professionals. This is 2022. Men know how to behave in the workplace, and, mentor a young woman, just as you would like someone to mentor maybe your daughter who's joining the rail industry. I think there's a great opportunity for men to play a role as an ally, and as, a way to improve the corporate culture and make it a workplace that you also are happy to work in. As it gets better for women, it gets better for everybody. So I think that's a great way for men to actively participate in building a stronger corporate culture. And I'd also say to employers, if you don't have a formal mentorship program, what are you waiting for? Like, this is proven in the literature that it's better for the company, it's better for your profitability, including people from diverse backgrounds and making a place for them in your company just makes you better and better and better. So it takes a lot of work, and it's not something you can go into lightly. I've seen programs that have, get women into the field and boots on the ground that have been abysmal failures because there was no support and there was no backup process. And women were sort of left without a lifeline back to the mothership. That's not good. You want the boots on the ground and sending young people out into the workforce, male or female, to be a life-altering experience, but a positive life-altering experience. So, it has to have a structure, and it has to have rules of engagement. But again, if you don't have a formal mentorship program, it's just by chance that people are getting mentored. And maybe it's not, there's people that should be getting mentored that aren't, because there's just no formal process for them to join. And I think, again, women and people of diverse backgrounds tend to hold themselves back a bit. And we've heard about the need for greater confidence and sticking yourself out there. So a formal program reaches into the company and finds those people. So I think, there's a lot to be said for formal programs. And there's a lot of people within this industry that want to give back, that want to share their knowledge, and a formal process lets that generational exchange and transfer of knowledge take place. And again, it's not an easy industry to learn, except from within the companies, and that's a way of ensuring that expertise and knowledge and passion are passed on to the next generation.
I agree with everything that's been said from the mentorship side of things. And maybe it's also having a broader conversation in some cases, like taking the step to have a broader conversation to find out what the impediments are for women in different areas and different pieces. I know Via just started doing some focus groups with women in the maintenance centers to find out, are there systemic barriers for them advancing their careers? What are they? What can we do about them? And I think we need to have broader conversations with groups of people to try and identify what the major issues still are, because they're still there. And although things have progressed and gotten better, I think we need to relook at what's actually still holding us back, given the current conditions and given where we are today. And then taking into account what's been said before about, creating something more formal, identifying who are mentors who are willing to do that, offering training or development for mentors as well, so that they have proper tools to use. But I think there's lots of opportunity that we can take on a daily basis, and certainly plan out to better plan how we're going to develop and continually evolve women in the workforce.
The only thing I would add to what has been said is I think it's important to make sure people know that you're mentoring, and make it known with your senior managers or people reporting to you, and then maybe ask them as well to make sure that they are mentoring as well, and that and follow up with them to make sure that they are. And I think that insisting on that and making this visible is important, in addition to everything that was said, Bushki, in terms of looking at having a program and all the good ideas that my colleagues shared. That's a tough question. I think, government has done better, because I think it's part of, quite frankly, of our duty to represent the population that we serve. I think we're doing better with women. We have still quite a way to do with other groups that we don't necessarily represent well as a whole. I'm not sure, but I would talk about quotas. I do think that targets make a big difference. I think that if you, I find targets in any parts of work, when you have a target, it always helps to therefore start measuring it and measure progress towards it. And it allows to have discussions around it. And I think that having a target also just, I would say, forces people to go a little bit beyond, and to maybe, in terms of recruitment, for example, not look only at your traditional recruitment, to maybe, really make sure that you have considered different bassins, like different pools of people, that you have looked at how your hiring or your staffing practices, to make sure that they don't bring discrimination or inside them. So I would certainly start with having targets and measuring them and monitoring that, and looking at what worked and what did not.
I'll start maybe. I think there's been much more discussion around mental health over the last years, not just with COVID, prior to COVID, and it's probably exacerbated by virtue of the fact people were isolated for so long. And I think the conversation's what's important. There is mental health issues. It's not gender-based. There are stressors for women, absolutely, because I think we put pressure on ourselves that we have to do everything and we have to be in control of everything from the family side to the work side. But I think part of the conversation has to go back to the roots of it, which is how do we find a balance for mental health? How do we ensure that everybody, we talk a lot about, get exercise, eat good food, do all these other things, but we also have to contemplate what it means from a mental health state perspective too. And we have to be willing to have that conversation. I can say that I've been in a couple of situations because we started talking about that. We did mental health first aid training. We started talking about that with the frontline groups. As a result of that, some people came up to me who they said they would never have come to speak to me if we hadn't embarked upon that exercise in the first place. So I think you have to start the conversation from mental health perspective first, and then women will come and say what their issues are. Men will too, because depression and issues related to mental health happen on both sides, men or women. And I think we have to be open to having those kinds of conversations, and they're not easy to have. We at our calls, we started off a number of years ago where we would have videos, and it talked to lots of different topics, but we actually had a couple videos on depression. We watched a video on depression, then we had a conversation around it. None of us had ever talked about depression before, but it started a conversation. So I would say you have to start from that perspective and then be willing and do not have the bias about not being one of the boys. You don't have to be one of the boys. And in actual fact, I would empower you to not be one of the boys, be yourself. It took me too long to get to that point where I felt comfortable doing that. And I would hope that women today coming into the workforce, seeing what's possible, will get there quicker. And they don't have to manifest themselves around what is accepted from a male perspective. It's more a question of who you are as a person, how you function, and what you're willing to give to the job, and be true to that, be true to who you are. But at the same time, we have to embark upon the other conversation because there are stressors that are different.
Well, I can add some ideas to this. I do not speak for CN any longer, so just point that out. I think in industry at large, it's been proven women have been paid less than men. And that's just not acceptable. And I think big corporations understand that and are making necessary changes. But it takes time to close that gap. And, if your employer has not moved to make pay grades more transparent and to have the conversation about equal pay for equal work, then they're behind the times. And I think this industry, is maybe a bit slower than banking industry and financial, but it's making its way through this issue. And I believe, that it's not being dragged there. It's doing it by choice. Again, these are good paying jobs. I tell women a lot of times, get a rail job. This is you're going to work hard, but you're going to work hard in any job, but you're going to be paid well, and railways in general pay well. So it doesn't mean that you should be paid less than your male colleague. That's not what I'm saying, but make sure that you're actually putting yourself in a position where you can earn a good living. And I think the rail industry is, a top employer, publicly recognized as employers of choice in some cases. And this issue is being corrected over time.
Thank you.
I'd like to add something, Jennifer, on that. So, the federal government, like the pay rate are job specific and they're public, right? So this issue does not apply. Everybody can know how much I make by just going on the web. So this is very different, except that recently I heard Christine Lagarde, who was the head of the International Monetary Fund, and she's now the head of the European Bank. And she was interviewed on women issues, actually. And one thing that she was saying is, like, she's been the head of an international organization for like 25 years. And she was saying that never, ever a woman has negotiated her salary. And she said, when I hire men, they always negotiate their salary. So I just wanted to, and made me think, because of course, as I said, in our case, we have one chance to negotiate, and it's when we join the public service. After, it's all predetermined, but I know it's different in the private sector. And I wanted to use this opportunity to pass on the message to all the women and men who are there, who are either, negotiating salaries for women, or in the women who have to probably speak up for themselves, that that you should not hesitate, therefore, to negotiate, because apparently the colleagues, men, according to Christine Lagarde, are doing it.
Thank you.
You're absolutely spot on. I don't think it does. I don't think it happens enough. Probably the majority of salaries, I have been my biggest advocate. But prepare for it, right? So go in knowing and being able to demonstrate what you, and it doesn't, to be perfectly frank, I'm not sure if it matters if you're a man or a woman. Being able to demonstrate and display what you bring to the table and what your worth is. Definitely being able to speak to it, and it's worked for me. Hopefully it works for others, but you are spot on, Frances, is be your own advocate and have that voice.
Yes.
Yes.
You need to mix it up. And I think, again, hiring practices are evolving, but a panel of people of diverse backgrounds, I'm sure, will find more diverse candidates and bring more diverse people into an organization. Like it or not, we all tend to feel more comfortable around people that look and sound like us. And, if you've got, a non-diverse hiring practice, you're going to have a non-diverse slate of candidates most of the time. So I think that's a great question, Katya, and that that's something that again this industry needs to work at. I think it was Karina that said when people look up in a company, they want to see people that look like them, because that lets them know that there's a place for them at the table. And having those that do the hiring look like the population they're trying to recruit is very helpful.
Thank you so much.
I do have one thing to add. It's a little bit of a story, because that absolutely is one side of it. And the other side of it is, years ago when I was in a position to be a part of the hiring process, I had one of my terminals and we were hiring 12 or 15 conductors. And I remember getting an email from the HR department saying, here is your selected list. There was 150 applicants, and here is the 30 we suggest that you interview. And I looked at the list, and maybe some of my personal bias as well, but always a champion. I sent an email back and said, do an expansion, because there's 2 people on this list that are women, and I want to see more. And I got a response back from the Human Resources Department, and they said that with the only 2 women who had applied. And that's where that conversation needs to really be pushed, and companies need to look at attracting, not to individual companies, attracting them to Rail. We have so much to offer. They have so much to offer us. Just needing to be able to adapt to get them to have that interest, and be able to participate in what we both have to offer each other.
Thank you all for being here today and for filling out the poll. Merci de votre présence avec nous aujourd'hui et d'avoir rempli notre sondage. Thank you to our keynote speaker, panelists, and moderator. You all helped make today a big success. And I would like to take that opportunity to share that at the association, we're very proud to have an executive team that is composed of 4 women out of 5 executives. So it makes it 80% women. So we hope to see you tomorrow for another exciting day of listening and learning. Au plaisir de vous revoir demain midi with the theme How Can Men Become Better Allies to Women? Donc, à bientôt and take care.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everybody.